What's up, everybody? Hello and welcome to episode number 303 of the VK Bros with Jason and Alex. VK, what's happening this week, brother?
I've had a big week this week. Now, we've brought this forward. Today's a Thursday. We don't usually do it on a Thursday. So we've kind of compressed the week somewhat. But I had a very busy day on the road. The auction went pretty good yesterday. There seems to be some buyers out in the market again, but albeit at sort of pretty cheap prices. There's a little bit of talk about the economy, which we'll talk about as well. But outside of that, nothing really that flash to report.
Nothing to report? Yeah, I've kind of got nothing to report either. So let's crack straight into the show, shall we?
Yeah, let me start.
You can start.
I noticed that the show that we just put up was probably the slowest burning show that we've had in a long time. And the show was specifically about the new budget, the new federal budget. And I was having a think about it, and I spoke to a couple of people, and I just wanted to get your thoughts. We purposely didn't speak about this because we wanted to leave it for the show. But in my mind, it's one of two things. Either people have so little care factor about like what a budget is or represents, or people are so dejected by it they don't even want to know.
Yeah, or maybe there's a third option too, which is exhaustion of hearing about it, because basically any Australian commentator on anything, including the mainstream media, it's all they've been talking about for a week. So I can understand if there's a bit of exhaustion there too. Yeah,
but our crew listens to our show because they know our take's going to be unique,
different,
compared to others, and that's like all the feedback that I get about the show, which is why I didn't think it was that. I spoke to a mate this morning, and he's like, look, for me, I have a mortgage on my house. I don't have a lot invested. None of that stuff really matters to me. And I also don't trust anything the government says anyway. So I know that whatever happens, they are lying to me. And I know that they are going to commit whatever injustice they can possibly inflict on us. And because I know that, I don't need to delve into it any deeper.
Right. It's probably not the worst framework to look at the world through.
Yeah, sure. But it sort of brings me back to when I asked at breakfast what everyone else's thoughts were, and they didn't have thoughts on it.
Yeah.
Which is okay. It's okay. You don't have to be involved in it. I know when I was young, one of the listeners of the show actually said this to me when I must have been 18 or 19 for selling cars together. He was much older than me. Shout out to Chris. I said, he's like, how do you feel about this particular political thing that was happening? I said, I don't care, man. I don't care. I'm 19. I'm selling cars. I'm making money, having a good time. I don't give a shit. I don't have time to waste on politics. And he goes, yeah, I get that, but I guarantee that in time you'll come around. And he was right.
Yeah,
I did come around. And I had spoken to some other young people about the same sort of thing, where they're like, it doesn't really matter. There's nothing I can really change. And now all of a sudden they've got some real skin in the game. Like a couple of friends that have started businesses and a couple of friends that have bought houses. And like, wait, what do you mean? What do you mean the government spends too much money, my mortgage payment goes up?
Yeah,
I don't get that, So everyone's eventually going to get dragged into politics. I don't want it. And I think where we give people a different outlook on things is we're definitely not like left or right, or Lib versus Labour.
Yep.
That's definitely not us. And we try to find the nuance in it, but we also, because we don't trust either party.
No.
And I thought we really did the work in terms of like what the stated policies were, and we're able to break down those policies and say, like, sort of extrapolate that out to people's future, what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm thinking it's more people feeling powerless about it.
Yeah, I tend to lean that way as well, because, like, look, just from a credibility perspective, like, let's say that you're a new listener to the show, you've only been listening to us for a couple of months or whatever. welcome. Thanks for being here. Like, share, subscribe, all those fun things. But if you look back at the history of the show, the times that we have stuck our neck out and made predictions on certain things, big items, we've had a pretty good hit rate. We spoke out early against the COVID measures. We spoke out early against the vaccines. We spoke out early against transgender ideology. And like, this show's been running for almost 6 years now. And in 6 years, we've literally gone through, even on the trans thing, this cycle where it went from essentially being a nothing burger and an Americanized thing, and it wasn't a problem over here, to it becoming a major issue, which culminated in the whole Tickle v. Giggle case, which went through last week. So, like, a lot of these things that we've been early to the game on, we've been pretty accurate on. And one of the things that we said over 12 months ago was that interest rates were going to go up after the election, because we knew, like your friend said, we don't trust the government, we don't trust a word that comes out of their mouths, and we know that they're not interested in having a balanced budget, therefore they're always going to overspend. And if they overspend, that causes too much demand in the economy, which then translates to higher inflation, which then translates into inevitable interest rate rises. And this is where sort of the rubber hits the road for a lot of people. And I think that what you were saying before about how a lot of people just feel a little bit helpless, like there's just nothing they can do about the things that are happening. There are things that you can do. There absolutely are. But I can tell you one thing. The guaranteed way to not be able to do anything about it is to ignore the problems as they're occurring.
Yeah, for sure.
And if we just continue...
Can't put your head in the sand.
Yeah, and like one of the things that I've been saying for years on this show is I believe, and unfortunately I'm seeing more and more evidence every single month, but I believe that this particular government that we have in power at the moment is part of this... I think there's been a lot of idea sharing between leftist governments around the world, and I'm sure right-wing governments do the same thing too, but particularly between here, the UK, and when the Democrats were running America, I think there was a conceded game plan that was set in place by these leftist governments on how they could maintain their power hold for the long term. And I think it all primarily comes down to increase immigration from countries that you know will vote for you once they are able to, and their children will vote for you. So you entrench a voter base, because that's happened in all three countries all at the same time, and essentially run your economies into the ground to the point where your citizens actually cannot afford to live without your intervention. And then you roll into every election promising to give out the most cost of living support. And so you essentially make people dependent on government.
Yeah.
And this just appears to be a game plan. And even, like I was talking, I spoke this week, I put a reel up about like the arrogance of the Albanese government and the way that it's been conducting itself. And this budget is the perfect example of it, because not only is it essentially a blatant tax grab, and it's not just a tax grab against young people, it's a tax grab against wealthy retirees as well. Because if you're a wealthy retiree, and now they've just put that 30% minimum tax on capital gains, if you're trying to sell investments and those sorts of things because you're self-funding your own retirement, well, they're going to slug you with a higher tax on that now as well. And so these are the people who've done it the right way their whole lives in the hope that they could proudly self-fund their retirement and not take a government pension, and now they're going to get slugged for it too. So it's a blatant tax grab which is affecting all generations, and yet it affects people at different levels, absolutely, and the people who are already inherently wealthy won't feel it as much as particularly the young people will. But the fact that this government comes out day in, day out since then, and essentially is still trying to sell it to you like this is good for you, it's just, to me, it's so gross. Like,
that's the part that gets me.
Yeah, this is an abusive relationship, right? This is the husband that hits his wife and says, like, look what you made me do to you.
Yeah.
Right? You made me do this to you. How dare you make me hit you? Do you not see how sad it makes me when you make me hit you? That's the relationship we have with our own government.
I mean, we talk about it a lot where people aren't willing to do the work, so they will read a headline and the headline is enough for them.
Yeah.
And the powers that be know this, so they'll just give you the headline.
Yeah.
I had an example, and I can't remember who I spoke about on the show, but at that breakfast, one of the girls had mentioned that Mamdani had just balanced the budget.
Yeah.
And I was like, I hadn't seen it. Can you send me the article that you read, please? I want to have a look at it. And I didn't have time to read it there at the breakfast, but I just punched it into AI and said, look, just give me check the validity of this article. And AI just quickly came back and said, look, it's a real short-term thing. It's not going to work long-term. So I showed her that. I was just like, I had 5 seconds to sort of respond, right?
Yeah.
And I've just said, like, this is what AI has said, and you can see my prompt. My prompt didn't say, how is this wrong? I said, check the validity of this.
Yeah.
And she goes, yeah, but short-term is better than nothing. And then I spoke to you about it. You had read the article prior, so I then go and read it. And I had to send it back to her and say, and for those that don't know the story, the only way Mamdani, in quotes, balanced the budget is he asked New York State for money.
Yeah. And there was another thing. There was another thing too. So they had a $12 billion shortfall. He got $8 billion as a handout from New York State. So in other words, New York City residents are benefiting from the tax dollars of the wider state, so people who don't live in the city. And Kathy Hochul essentially gave him the money because she's trying to win votes because she's worried about being voted out. And the other thing he did was there's certain pension commitments and stuff that they're supposed to pay out, and he's just deferred paying those until I think 2037 was the date that they put in. So again, all he's done is taken free money and kicked the can down the road, and then come out in front of everyone and gone, "Look how fiscally responsible I am. I've balanced your budget." And the Victorian Labor government just did the exact same thing.
The headline was enough. The headline was enough to get their people to say that they've done something well.
Yeah.
They've done something good. And this is where, we talk about the different versions of reality. And what I don't like is I feel like there are people online that are talking about this, but they're talking about it in the wrong context, where they're saying you can't change someone else's reality, okay? Because everyone sees the world in their own way, which I think is the excuse to keep falling for fake news.
Yeah, that's a psyop. That's essentially encouraging people who don't understand how the world works that you are right and just keep on rolling.
Yeah. Whereas what we try to do here is we try to bring real world examples, we try to extrapolate forwards, we try to use historic evidence to predict what that is going to do. And the one thing I keep saying is this ideology, this socialist ideology, all comes from one place and one place only, and that's Karl Marx, the Communist Manifesto. And that book sucks. It's right. So your whole I said, read every other economics textbook that's in existence. It will say the opposite of that book. But you guys, and you don't even know it. You haven't read it yourself. You've done no research. You don't know who the guy is. But that's what you're going to base your ideology off because it feels good to say. That's it. It feels good to say equality and everyone should be looked after and all these things. But when the rubber hits the road, if that policy doesn't do remotely close to what you think it's going to do, then it is bad. It doesn't matter that it sounds good. It is bad. Like going back to the wife beating thing. Like, I bash you because I love you.
That's right.
Right, that's what it is.
Yep.
And it is a very toxic relationship. This scourge of socialism that's coming through, and like you said at the start of this, where they are forcing you to have no choice but to fall into socialism.
Correct. They're creating economic conditions where it's impossible for you to live without the state.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Australia, I keep saying it, the productivity is the real issue. We spoke about how at least they mentioned productivity in their address. Problem was the numbers they cited were very different to the Australian Bureau of Statistics stats that we brought up on this show only the week before. So I don't know where he got those figures from. And I think there was another clip that we probably should have grabbed, but he was quoting
Jim Chalmers.
Jim Chalmers was quoting another figure, and the guy goes, "Where did you get those figures from? Because we got these figures that say something different to what you've got." And he's like, well, regardless of that, like, don't worry about the figures.
Yeah.
They just want you to feel good. They know that all they have, if you feel good from hearing what they say, that's enough.
Yeah.
And where I can't get off that is that's not real.
No, it's not.
I live in reality. I live in ontological truth. What is real? And what is real is that economically there are fundamentals. And the fundamentals of our economy are the inflation rate is stealing your labor.
Yep.
So inflation equals devaluation of the currency. You work for that currency. So the more they inflate it, the more resource they are stealing from you.
Yep.
Every signal that you could look at in terms of taxation, like we said on last week on the show, how come they index the upside but don't index the downside?
Yep.
You know what I mean by that? Why are they going to index your capital gains, but they won't index your tax-free threshold?
Yep. And they ignore the fact that any investment that you pay for in this country, you're paying for with money that you've already paid tax on.
Yes. Now with that indexation thing, that structure promotes the government to have even worse fiscal policy, because the more inflation in the market, the more taxation they receive, and through your bracket creep.
Yep.
And then they'll take a clip on the other end too.
And also it deflates the value of the national debt. So it's actually in their favour to just keep creating a high inflationary environment, even though it's not in your favour.
And that's where, like, I didn't watch Angus Taylor's.
I didn't either. I don't think there was any point in doing it. He's not going to win.
No one has sent me any highlights of it. The stuff, or I did see a couple little clips, and it was just, it's the same old, like, because I hate the idea of this Australian dream thing. I think that's a psyop too.
Yeah.
That is a let's rabble-rouse people to believe that the only goal in the life of an Australian is to own a house. That's it.
Yeah.
Which I think is dumb.
We used to joke about this in the motor trade, like when we were selling cars, that dealerships loved guys who had expensive habits, whether it was drugs or fast cars or whatever, because they were always in debt and they always needed money. And because of that, they would always show up to work and they would do their best to sell as many cars as you could. So those guys were actually super profitable for a dealership because they needed the cash. So they were going to go and find money. Whereas someone who was, fiscally responsible and had heaps of money behind him, the incentive to work as hard is not quite there. That's essentially what the government has been doing for decades, with convincing you that the Australian dream is for you to get yourself a 30-year mortgage on a house. And pay
at 15 times earnings.
Yeah, and pay double the amount of the house in interest over that period of time. It's literally to keep you on the hamster wheel where you have to constantly be this cog in this economic machine to just pay your bills, right? But sorry, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Someone just pinged me a Purple Pingers post about Purple Pingers is a communist from Victoria.
Yeah.
He's promoting that people go and squat in vacant houses, and being a landlord who has had both of his properties squat in, I can tell you it's not pleasant. It's very unpleasant. But also, the point he was trying to make, he was showing that this rental property that was listed in, it was actually in Brisbane, and it was an absolute shit heap, but it was really expensive. And I haven't had the chance. I was literally just walking into this call, so I couldn't go on the comments. But I wanted to see, like, you realise that this change that they make now disincentivizes them to spend money on that property, right? Because now you can't deduct the expenses of that on that asset. Therefore, the quality of the property will get worse. Now, this is not me being. I'm not guessing. We know that this happens. You can look at New York as the example. They have rent-controlled properties over there. Which, because there are zero incentives to spend any money on it, because they can't make market rate for them, they just don't spend the money on it. The only way they can get people out of those properties is to keep them in such bad states of repair that people want to leave.
Yeah, that's right.
So people aren't, it frustrates me that people aren't smart enough to see that, or to use, or at least even to have like a vague algorithm that they use to decide whether a policy is good or not.
But that's also by design. And I think that this entire budget conversation is the best example of people being psyoped into not knowing how the world really works for the gain of the people in power. And I'll explain why. So, going right back to the beginning of the budget conversation, the entire focus point of the government and all of their advertising around it was housing affordability for young people. Housing is out of reach of young people, right? That's the way that it was marketed. That's the way it was sold at the beginning. And Labor, all they want to talk about when it comes to housing affordability is two things. Number one, not enough supply. So that's their justification to continue bringing migrants in, because apparently every migrant they bring in is a builder who's going to build a house on day one when they come into the country. So we're going to increase supply that way.
Well, that gives them a house for them. What about the next builder?
Yep. Anyway, the next thing they want to talk about is essentially greedy rich people hoarding houses, right? Hoarding wealth. And they want to make it less attractive for those wealthy, greedy people to hoard all these rental properties. Okay, those were the main focus points from the government. Now talk about Angus Taylor. When Angus Taylor was talking about the budget and everything, he's essentially trying to win votes from One Nation supporters because he was the only one who brought up immigration. And the obvious fact that if you have a cost of housing problem, when you bring more and more people in every single day who require housing, you add to the demand side, therefore you're making the problem worse. Now that is true as well. But neither of the major parties have spoken about the real reason why housing prices in Australia rise. Do you know what the real reason is? What is the number one factor when it comes to housing prices rising?
I don't think you're going to say the same thing I'm going to say.
Well,
I think I'm right.
What would you think it is?
It's money creation. It's availability of credit, money creation.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It is availability and accessibility of credit.
Yeah.
And I went through this during the week, and I've got some numbers for you as well. So go back to 2011. So I mainly went back to 2011 because this is the post-GFC world, right? We had the global financial crisis from like 2008 onwards, and then 2011 was when we were in the sort of recovery phase from the GFC. Since then, the Australian M3 money supply has risen by 175%. Right? And as Alex talks about all the time, the number one way we create money in Australia is when you go and get a new mortgage on a property. There's essentially, like, the bank doesn't have the money, they create an electronic journal entry and they give you the money, and that creates this money out of thin air. So in a rising property market, in a low interest rate environment, which is what we were in for that decade between 2011 and 2021, that absolutely supercharged the amount of money supply that we had in this country. Now, during that period of time, property prices rose 120%. Right? So very closely mirrors it. And the only reason why they didn't rise 175% is because obviously when money is cheap and easily available, people are going to take that money, but they might invest it in different things as well. They're going to invest it in shares, they're going to invest it, like obviously Bitcoin was a big thing that people put some money in during that period of time. So even though you had that increase in money supply, some of that money got diverted to other asset classes because everything raised during that time. Now, the other thing that sort of capped property prices to an extent is the fact that in that same period of time, wages only increased by about 45 to 60% based on what you were doing. Mm-hmm. So when you add all those factors together, essentially, so I sold finance for years, right? And as a lender, the number one thing that you are looking at in someone's finance application is their capacity to borrow. So capacity means what are your current, like how much money do you make minus how much money you have to spend every month in cost of living and any other commitments, other loans and stuff like that. The money that's left over, we then view as your capacity. That's essentially how much money you can afford to spend every single month. And you say this all the time. How do people go and buy houses in Australia? They go into the bank to get a pre-approval, and the bank says, you can borrow this much money.
Yeah, this is the max that you can spend.
That's right, and that might be $1.2 million. And then the customer goes, that sounds great. I'm going to go and look at $1.2 million properties. right? That's how people essentially buy housing in Australia.
Yeah.
But here's the key point. Those capacity factors during that period of time that supercharged housing prices have been completely flipped on their head even prior to this budget and all the changes that came out. So think about the difference in the economy now compared to during that period. For a start, interest rates have risen by about 4% during that period of time, which is huge. And I need people to understand this as well. Whenever you go and get a loan, when they do that capacity check on you, they actually check your capacity against a rate 3 percentage points above the rate they think that you're going to get. And that is supposed to cushion you from any impacts when the interest rates get raised, right? So every single person who got loans during that very low interest rate period, their interest rate has actually risen by more than what that capacity buffer would have been, that 3% buffer.
Yeah, interesting.
Right? Because the rate's gone up 4%. Yeah. So when your interest rates rise, that means the money costs more every single month. Therefore, your capacity to borrow decreases. So you might have been able to borrow 1.2 5 years ago. Maybe now you can only borrow $1 million. On the other side of the equation too is cost of living. So we have this thing called HEM, household expenditure measure. It's essentially, a rough figure of how much it costs certain family setups to essentially live every single month. So it doesn't include things like rent and credit cards and stuff. They all have to be counted separately. But it's essentially going, look, a ballpark figure of how much it's going to cost you for food and clothing and all the incidentals, right? Now, you've got to think, those household expenditure measures, they would have had to have been increased by 40% in the last 4 years because of the cumulative inflation that we've experienced. So that then affects people's borrowing capacity as well. And then when you add in all of the other factors, like literally the cost of everything that you do now is more expensive than it was 4 or 5 years ago. Essentially, everyone's capacity has gone from up here, and then it's been chipped away and chipped away and chipped away and chipped away. And another thing's just come out today. I don't know if you've heard about this yet, but some of the major banks have already gone back to brokers and said, hey, those pre-approvals that you had in place for some investors that were trying to buy investment properties, we actually need to reassess those applications. And essentially their capacity is dropping by about 20%. Both Westpac and Macquarie have already said this.
And let me just paint you a little bit of picture of what that looks like. That will only really negatively affect the first home buyer. So the people that are already asset backed that are going to go and refinance their property to go get into something else, they will be slightly affected. But because they've got the upside of the property that they currently own, it'll be much easier for them, which is actually going to greatly create the divide that the government is posing to get rid of.
Yep.
So it's just something to keep in mind, like the structure. And look, we have a little bit of inside. Jason's worked in finance. I've broken a couple of these deals myself, for myself. I've experienced this for myself. Like, talking about low interest rates, I started in 2008 when I bought my first property. My interest rate was 3.6%.
Yeah.
It ended at 9.6%.
Yep.
And I think my payments were as low as $1,300 a month, $1,360, to as high as like $4,500.
Yeah.
And think about that. I wasn't earning it. Jason had to live with me, and I had to get a mate in as well. There was 3 of us in there, that were paying me rent just to cover the mortgage.
Yeah.
So, and to paint a picture there, I'm now getting emails from those same properties on the Gold Coast are now selling for 2.3 times what I paid for mine.
Yeah, which essentially follows the money creation that's happened since you sold those places. So
I just want to can I just stick to the money thing just for a second?
Yeah.
So I don't want to gloss over it, because I think I'm a Bitcoiner, right? And I'm making a big bet that Bitcoin is going to be the life raft off this system. And one of the biggest things about Bitcoin is the scarcity part, the fixed supply.
Yeah.
There is only ever going to be 21 million. It's written in the code. There cannot be any more. But if you think about anything that is rare, things that are scarce are valuable.
Yeah.
Things that are not scarce are not valuable. So gold is hard to get out of the ground. There's not much of it, so it's valuable. Water, which is for life, is free.
Yeah.
Okay, because it's abundant.
For now.
Yeah, it falls out of the sky. The money supply, and this is what used to frustrate me a lot when I'm talking Bitcoin with people, they say they like tangible assets. Your money, the cash that you work for, is printed out of thin air and sold back to the person that instigated the print at an interest rate.
Yeah.
It is the biggest scam in human history.
And due to, like, people think that buying a new car is a bad investment because you lose so much money in taxes when you drive it off the lot. That money that's been created will never be as valuable as it was on the day it was created and given to you. Mm-hmm. Because the next day, more money's been created and given to someone else, which has devalued the money that you just got.
Yep.
Yeah,
and also what Jason said is really important is the availability of credit. It's I used to get in arguments all the time with my supply and demand buddies, it's just supply and demand. It's just supply and demand. The supply for housing is so strong. I'm like, then how come milk's gone up? Like, is the demand strengthening for milk? No, it hasn't. So it's milk, groceries, artwork, stock market.
Yeah, it's everything.
Everything. So it's not a supply and demand thing, because if it were the case, then there's some things that have gone down in price. Nothing's gone down in price. And the reason why nothing's gone down in price is because the thing you're using to pay that thing is worth less.
That's the only thing that's gone down in price.
Because they literally advertise this every month in terms of the consumer price index.
Yeah.
And they call it the price index because they want you to think that it's a pricing issue. It's not a pricing issue.
No.
It's the underlying currency you're using to pay the price.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
Yeah, so here's, just to wrap my point up in a little bow, because I think this has been a really good discussion on it. My point is this. All the discussion over the last week, since the budget, has been about housing and all of these different reasons why housing's out of reach of young people, and the Labor government has used it as an excuse to try to do one of the biggest tax grabs in Australian history, and not one of the major political parties has told you the real reason why housing prices inflated so much since 2011, and it's purely down to money creation.
Yeah.
So no wonder why no one knows how the world works, because they're told all these other bullshit reasons why something is the way that it is that are completely irrelevant to it. And the other point too is, like, in Australia, we typically have like an 18-year property cycle, and we were just at the tippy top of the property cycle. So essentially we had hit the peak, and usually what happens is after the peak, there's like a 3-year drop off in housing prices, and like that's sort of the start of the next cycle, and then it sort of levels out, and then so in other words, if you bought a house and you held it for 50 years, over time the trend is always upward. But it doesn't mean there aren't corrections during that period. So we're already at the peak of the property cycle, and then you have a giant range of other factors which were all going to affect the number one reason for inflated housing prices, which was people's individual capacity to borrow money to buy the house, right? High interest rates, high inflation, fuel prices. Those are the main reasons why people were not going to have as much capacity to borrow today as they had 6 months ago, because those factors keep getting worse for the average borrower, which means the average borrower cannot borrow as much money, which means they cannot pay the prices for the houses that people are asking. And that's a natural part of the cycle.
Well, that's not entirely true. So yes, the aspect that you're saying is correct, but you're not factoring in what banks will more than likely do, which is change the rules. They'll just change the hen level. They will, because the banks aren't going to lose out of this.
Yeah.
Don't worry. They're going to find a way to profit. And we've seen it before where they'll go, well, maybe you don't need a 5% deposit anymore. How about a 3% or a 2% or a 1% deposit?
Yep.
How about we kick the deposit to your parents? How about we, do you know what I mean? Like they're going to reduce the hem level. They're going to say, well, people are pretty good at paying their bills. So the hem level was $1,500. Let's call it $1,200. which is going to kick another $300 worth of capacity, which the bank is then just going to lend back to you so they can, sell you that at an interest rate.
Yeah. Like, something will change. But the reality is, all the reasons why the government is telling you they've had to do this tax grab were lies. Every single one of them. And it doesn't...
Every single one. And if it was real, and this, I really want to hammer this point. If they really wanted young people to be able to get into the property market, they would have grandsoned the rules for investing in shares in crypto.
Yeah.
Right? And what I mean by that, it's not even a term. I've just made the term up. Instead of grandfathering the old deal that everyone benefited from, let's grandson the deal that's going to help get the result that you're saying. So why don't they just block out anyone that has assets already, can't further get any more capital gains discounts? But let's only give capital gains discounts to new people into crypto markets, to new people into share markets, because that's going to give them the ability to raise their capital to eventually help them go and buy a house.
Exactly.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
But we've done the opposite of that.
All we've done is we've told everyone we're going to solve the affordability crisis by making it way more expensive for all of you.
Yeah.
Because you're just not going to be able to create enough money to keep up.
Also, not to mention what's going to happen to rent. Rent's going to go up.
Yep.
And like a lot, because you can't. And they're going to be, if the land, there's now less incentive to spend money to maintain your property because you can't take it off your taxable income.
Yeah. But Alex, the modelling said that rents would only go up by $2 a week.
Yeah, because a new. What's the last job that you did around your house that costs $2 in a week? How much are fucking sink fittings?
Yeah, more than $2.
They're $2, right?
Yeah.
For one, like it's just outrageous.
Yeah.
It's just like you said. I almost feel too. And look, someone had said this to me. She's a very sweet girl, and she said, "Violence isn't the answer." And I was like, "Well, if you've read any history book, it would say that that's wrong."
Yeah.
There would, like, I wonder how was it the Philippines, or was it? No, it wasn't Thailand. What was the one that we covered on the show where the students just got jack of it because all the politicians' kids were living the dream, and meanwhile no one else is getting paid, so they just went and burnt Parliament House.
Yeah, what was that? Indonesia or something?
It was somewhere in Indonesia. Yeah. And they changed government.
Yeah.
And unfortunately we live in such a safe society, but meanwhile we're just getting milk, more and more resource, more. And then their answer to it, this is the part that frustrates me as well, is, and you got people like Friendly Geordies talking around, they've done real wage increases. Yeah, government wage increases.
That's right.
Or forced minimum wage increases, which are inflationary.
Yep.
They do not work. They have never worked. Go read an economics book. You'll realize that if you increase the cost base on a business, the business has to pass it on to everyone else. Therefore, any gain that you've made in terms of your minimum wage has just been absorbed by the things that you have to buy with that money. So it's an oxymoron. Now, I keep saying, when I am Grand Poobah, God King, Xerxes, God King of Australia, productivity is going to be the key. And when the government said in their budget things that they're going to reduce $36 billion worth of regulatory costs.
Mm-hmm.
No, sorry. That was just, no, they're going to do $10 billion in reduction. I would do $100 billion in regulatory costs savings.
Yeah.
And business would be untethered. So my mate at the cafe that wants to start selling booze can sell booze tonight.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to wait 6 months. He can do it. He doesn't need to send us schematics for how far the toilet is away from it. He doesn't need to do that because he has a toilet. And that's all I need to know.
Yeah.
He's got a toilet. And I actually don't need to know because, you know what? If he doesn't have a toilet, the proprietor's going to be pretty annoyed when the guys keep pissing on his bar, right?
Yep.
And he's going to handle that himself.
Yeah.
So I don't need to get involved as a government into business. I'm not a business person. I'm a government bureaucrat, right? Let business do business.
Yeah. Completely agree. What do you want to talk about next?
We need to burn it down, dude. We need to burn the system. No, but I want to talk solutions.
Actually, can I talk about that sentiment, right? Because You are right. Throughout history, it has shown us that as much as people say violence is not the answer, typically violence is the answer. Violence is the thing that causes the change. It's the catalyst for real change in most places. But I want to encourage people, have a violently aggressive mentality towards this government and the way they treat you, but in a societal sense. So what do I mean by that? I mean, this government clearly wants to tax you to death. They want to take all of your money. So
if not half through tax and half through super.
Yeah, so what is ironic about all of this is that the vast majority of people, as we have previously discussed, don't know how the financial system works. I can tell you right now, there's going to be a generation of young people that comes through that will educate themselves in how to minimize their tax as much as possible. They're actually encouraging that behavior, right? Because if you push too far, it's like I said it last week, it's physics. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So they want to have higher tax intake from you. Well, now they're going to encourage a generation of young people coming through to find ways to minimize their tax as much as humanly possible. So they're going to...
Okay, so to cite, because this is what we do when we're thinking about topics, what is a piece of information that we know is real that fits on this? Cigarette tax.
Yeah.
Cigarette tax, a sin tax, goes up every 6 months. So fuel, alcohol, cigarettes goes up every 6 months. Okay? What's happened with cigarettes now is a pack of cigarettes is $60, and the market, the free market, who is the one that's spending the money on this thing, has decided we're not willing to pay $60. Now, what the government thought was going to happen is that people would just stop smoking, but people love smoking. Okay?
Yeah.
So what do? A black market goes, I have a solution to your problem. As long as you don't want to do it legitimately, I can supply you with these cigarettes for $10 a pack.
Yep.
And what's happened now? The revenue that was supposed to have been raised with legitimate cigarettes is essentially zero.
Yep.
It's gone to nothing. We joked about it because the stats were saying that smoking rates were going down, but they were using the data for the taxation data. They didn't realize all those people just moved to illegal cigarettes.
Exactly.
So one government policy has created the black market to fill in what the free market wants. Now, some people might say smoking is a bad example, but I want us to also think about the hierarchy that we're supposed to have as a society in life. The government is not your boss.
Yeah.
The government's not your daddy, right? Freedom is what we should be aspiring towards. I want to do what I want to do.
Yep.
And I want to interact with people the way I want to interact with people. I want to start a business. I want to have a mutual relationship with the people that I deal with on a daily basis. It's not the government's job to tell us how to do that. The government has proven that they can't build culture. This is why we're having all this social cohesion problems, because they can't instill a culture. And the reason why they can't is because you can't select for 30 million people what to think.
Yeah, and they're trying to do it by force.
Yeah, which will never work. But the free market will do it. The invisible hand of the free market. It's a famous line, right? It is a very real thing. The cigarettes is a great example. So it's going to happen with booze. I totally agree with you, Jason. What's going to happen is the smart people are going to use AI to figure out the best ways to pay less tax.
Absolutely. And so it's going to end up doing the opposite of what they want.
Which it always does.
But I also want to make a wider point too, because you brought up the cigarettes thing, and this is something you say all the time, which we should hammer on about. The reason why those sin taxes go up every 6 months is because the government says, if we make this more expensive through tax, people will do less of it. And yet, what have we just added more taxes to? Investing.
Yeah, and like productive things.
Productive things, right? Investing in shares, investing in property, and yeah, essentially
working.
And working. Essentially trying to invest in your own futures. They're trying to discourage you from doing those things. It's the only possible explanation, isn't it? Because if they do it for the sin taxes, why is it not the same when you apply it to everything else you increase taxes on?
It's so funny because when I bring that up to people, their brains just switch off. I say, like, why do we give people fines for speeding?
Yeah.
Oh, because we don't want them to speed. Okay, why do we fine someone for being productive? And like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, we have a progressive tax system. So someone that's more productive than the person they were before pays a higher fine for being more productive. Explain how that's a good thing.
That's right.
And their brain goes straight to, well, you need to share and Well, hold on. You've got the beauty of a capitalist society is that you can be as productive as you want to be, right?
Yep.
And the benefit of having lots of money is that you can now deploy it in things that you think is valuable to you and your family.
Yep.
And then the beauty of that is that people will realize, hey, there's a real thirst in my community to have this product that I'm actually willing to provide.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's how the ecosystem is supposed to build.
That's right.
The best societies on Earth all started with this ethos, but now they're leaning towards the left. They're leaning towards the left, which is saying, now get all that and give it to everyone. But then no one brings up, for everyone that brings up Karl Marx, I like to bring up Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah.
Right? The story of Atlas Shrugged. So those that don't know, Ayn Rand, she wrote a book, and it was a fictional book, which posed the idea, which is basically, she's essentially writing about Australia.
Yeah.
Right now. Okay, so she wrote this book 50 years ago. And in this world, there's a guy that has this great business that makes heaps of money, but the government decided that he's too rich, so we're going to take that money and give it to other people. So he left. And then the next person that was really good, he left too. And the next person that came up that was really productive, they left. And then they're like, how come we don't have any stuff here?
Yeah.
Right? And then they went to the utopia. And in our case, the utopia is going to be Dubai, it's going to be Florida, it's going to be Texas. All the smart people, all the big brains, all the entrepreneurs are going to go to where they're going to be looked after. Now, the best rebuttal that I've heard when I've brought this up is, well, not everyone's an entrepreneur, which is correct.
Mm-hmm.
But you all work for one.
Yep.
Right? So it's fair. You don't have to own a business. And I'm not saying that you need to base your life like you're going to own a business. I'm not saying that at all. But if you're going to work in the public sector, the private sector, sorry, you're going to work for someone that has taken a risk and has been the entrepreneur.
Correct.
Or you're going to work for the state. Now, if you work for the state, if everyone works for the state, okay, you'll produce nothing.
That's right.
Because the state doesn't produce anything.
No. And
I keep asking this question too, because it's another foreign concept. Because people go, oh, there's services that we all like. Okay, name one.
Yeah, name one government service you actually enjoy dealing with.
Yeah. Now, for every one that you can name, because people will say, well, like doctors and nurses and police and fireys. That's it. And I'm okay with that. The government should just do that.
Yeah.
But they don't just do that, do they?
No.
They're in everything. They're in my business. They don't. I have to buy a car. I have to use all my knowledge to buy the right car. And I have to stake all the capital. If I get it right, they take money. If I get it wrong, they take money.
Yeah. Yep.
Where's the partnership there?
And like, I was just listening to the latest Karl Stefanovic show where he was interviewing, I can't remember if they're from New South Wales or from Victoria. Either or, it might be Victoria. And they're talking about, there's these farmers, right? And these farmers are talking about these new laws that they brought in where essentially for renewables projects, the government has just given themselves the right to essentially forcibly acquire parts of your property for things like building transmission lines and towers and stuff for these renewable projects. And it's like, again, even if you're the most far left-leaning person going, well, green energy's the right thing for everybody and we should be doing more of it, blah, 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 surely you have to draw the line at government forcibly acquiring people's land. Surely. Right? Because again,
well, if socialists don't like private property.
Well, that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
Because this is the thing. This is one of those lines in the sand where if you don't fight this now, when is there going to be a justification for the government to forcibly acquire your land?
Well, they're already forcibly acquiring your labour.
Yeah, exactly.
What's next?
That was interesting.
I would argue that this tax policy is going to make sure that you never have an asset for them to take anyway. They'll own it anyway.
Do you know one of the biggest indicators that the winds are a changing in Australia?
What?
Did you see some of the comments that Chris Minns, New South Wales Premier Chris Minns, has made over the last week?
No.
Okay, very interesting. So Chris Minns is, again, a shrewd political animal. He is the Labor Premier from New South Wales. And the two main subjects, the Tickle v Giggle case and also the budget. With the Tickle v Giggle case, he has literally come out and said that in New South Wales law, like, a woman is an adult human female, and that there has to be these stipulations in place to protect women and female spaces and etc. Now, only a couple of years ago, I think it was when he was actually running for Premier, he said the complete opposite thing. So you can tell he's seen that the winds are changing, therefore he's trying to move with the winds to keep the votes coming in. But the other thing that he was talking about with the budget, I found really, really interesting, because there's two parts of it, which one of them I found absolutely hilarious. But the first part was, he was talking about how Australians and New South Welshmen in particular are way overtaxed on their labour. And he literally made the comment that people go to work from Monday through to halfway through Wednesday to pay themselves, and then they essentially work the rest of the week to pay the government. And he doesn't think that's fair. So that's massive, right? Because the number one thing we always talk about with left-wing politicians is they are collectivists. They never go off script. They never criticize each other. They are a united front. It's the reason why they've been so successful. So the fact that Minzy has felt emboldened enough to do that means, I think, two things. Number one, he can tell that his own electorate is shifting, therefore he's trying to get ahead of it. And number two, he thinks Albo's days are numbered. That's what I'm picking up from that.
Yeah, look, I want politicians to change their tune when the voter base changes.
Yep.
I don't want Pauline to change because she's been right for 30 years.
Yep.
But I think that it's an interesting point. I don't think Labor's days are numbered. I think you've nailed it.
No, Albo's days are numbered.
I don't know. What do we want Penny Wong as the...
No, I'm not saying what we want. I'm saying that this, I think, is just political reality, and he's getting in front of it, because I think that this just, we see this with politics.
I don't think so, man. I think that so the people that are voting for Labor don't own any assets, won't own any assets, not interested in owning any assets, don't really have jobs.
Except for the fact that they probably work for the government, have had massive pay increases over the last 4 years, so now they're going to be in a position where they can actually own assets, and then once they own those assets, they'll be like, fuck, bring Pauline in. I want to actually conserve some of this wealth. But here's the thing that I found hilarious that he was talking about. The federal government just did the mashup of the GST revenue and who gets the GST revenue. And I think New South Wales only gets back, I can't remember the exact number, it was about 85% of the GST revenue that it generates. And Victoria is being given extra GST because their budget's in such disrepair. So they're literally getting, it's like the Mumdani effect, right? Federal government is handing them more of the GST pie because they can't handle their own budgets. And I found it so funny to hear a premier whinging. He's like, but if New South Wales generates X amount of GST revenue, then we should receive that amount of revenue, because it's what we generate.
What a crazy concept.
Right? And it's like, brother, you want 100% of the value of what you generate, and we're in a country where we're getting taxed at 50.
Yeah.
Like, isn't that wild? So when it's a politician and their money, their pot of money that they want access to, they want all of it. But when it's your money, they don't think that you deserve any of it because they can spend it better than you can.
I think we need to leave it there. I think that's a really important... It's really what we've spoken about today is all the stuff that I wanted to really belt into people's minds.
Yeah.
And I want people at barbecues and family dinners and in the office around the water fountain. I want people to start dropping these bombs on people.
Yeah,
need it.
The key is, look, we've said this times in the past, but the number one thing I learned from COVID was the reason why bad ideas become part of the public zeitgeist so quickly is because they make it toxic to go against them in a public forum. You just have to hit these nails on the head as they appear. right? So when you're at the barbecues, when you're at your social events or whatever, you got to talk about this stuff.
Socialist events.
Yeah, but you got to talk about these things in a normal way, because they know if they make it politically or socially toxic for you to speak about a certain narrative, they get to push their narrative all day, every day through all of the various channels, and there's no rebuttal in the marketplace of ideas.
If you can't talk about it, that's why you should be talking about it.
Absolutely, totally agree. Let's leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. We'll see you all next week.
See ya.